Well, we will continue our studies with Christian worldview and biology. Biology is one of the popular science subjects that has drawn much attention today because of evolution. The important question that we are dealing with is, what is the origin of life? Actually, science is learning an old question. The more one discovers about the universe, the more one discovers design. So last weeks we have discussed various aspects of the problems science faces, and especially Christianity and science. Today we will start our discussion a little bit on the DNA. Is it possible for DNA to be evolved? That's the question. That's a technical question. I am not a technician. I am not a biologist or a biochemist. That sort of subject. My subjects are law and political science and theology. Some chemistry also I know, because I did a degree in chemistry also. But from my reading and from my study, DNA, I will say that no scientist has to this day proved that DNA could be evolved. The human DNA cannot be evolved. Actually, in the labs, they have tried to create DNA, but they could never get a left DNA, LDNA. They always get an rDNA. And so that's a major problem they face. So the existence and the properties of DNA, supports creationism, both through the teleological argument and by demonstrating evolutionary theories' inability to explain crucial aspects of life. How could DNA be evolved? Because DNA contains the genetic information of any type of life, organism of life. You take the DNA of a single-celled amoeba, it has all the information of that amoeba. So you have to erase all that information about the amoeba and write the information about another, life that is going to be evolved. So it's a question of like, a child has written one page, you have to erase it to write something else. That's just not going to be, possible. Anytime production happens, an amoeba produces amoeba, because the cells have the information about the amoeba. That the DNA contains that only. So to evolve a different type of information recorded in it is scientifically never proved. Never proved. So DNA contains a genetic information code which is crucial part of all living matter. Evolutionary theories cannot explain how DNA could come into existence by chance. How could DNA come into existence by chance? Chance can never produce DNA, because DNA contains so much information. Something like thousands of pages of information is contained in that one. And all these systematic information of color and height and weight and functions and everything is recorded in that. How can all this thing be recorded, by a process of accident is something the science also cannot explain. This teleological quality of DNA, that is, a teleological quality means the systematic organization. That's what teleology. Teleology is, it has a system, it has an order. That systematic order, that quality of DNA is overwhelming. Charles Thaxton believes DNA is the most powerful indicator of intelligent design. Is there any basis in experience for an intelligent cause for the origin of life? Any evidence for an intelligent cause for the origin of life? Yes, that is only what you have. If you study any DNA, you know that behind the DNA there is an intelligent mind that has put down all that. it cannot be evolved. It's the analogy between the base sequence in DNA and alphabetical letter sequence in a book. You take any book, there is an alphabetical letter sequence. If it is to make any sense, just putting letters won't make any sense. You just write A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. How can it make any sense? You have to have alphabetical sequence to make sense. If you wanted God, then G-O-D. If you wanted dog, then it should be D-O-G. The alphabetical sequence can be a reality only by intelligent beings behind it. So you need to know whether you are talking about God or dog. It's the same alphabets. There is a D and G and O. But this alphabetical sequence makes the whole difference. So how can the chance make that, it's dog and not God? But intelligence can make it. So that is a problem, the biological evolutionists, very difficult for them to answer it. We can assume DNA is a product of intelligence because it is analogous to human language, which are without exception the product of intelligence and minds. You take any book, no book can come in by accident. It has only 26 alphabets in English language. Your consonants and your syllables, vowel points and everything, only 26 letters. Even with these 26 letters, the reorganization of it takes a mind. But when you come into DNA, how many? So the more complex DNA can be arranged by accident through chance, while the less complex book cannot be produced by accident. Well, it doesn't make any sense. No. So the biological evolutionist has really a problem in explaining. Even if we reject the teleological nature of DNA, its very existence undermines evolutionary theory. Because for DNA to be a reality, there should be certain information to produce the DNA. You cannot have an amoeba without DNA. You cannot have an amoeba without DNA because the DNA, the information in the amoebic DNA is what makes DNA. If it had the information about a dog, then the amoeba won't be an amoeba because it will be a dog. So who will put it? That's the question. The amoeba cannot itself put all the information about the amoeba. So that means that both of them have to be simultaneously together there. So DNA can only be produced with the help of at least 20 different types of proteins. But these proteins can only be produced at the direction of a DNA. That's interesting. To produce a DNA, you need at least 20 proteins. But these 20 proteins can be produced only by the help of a DNA. Since each requires the other, a satisfactory explanation for the origin of one must also explain the origin of the other. Apparently, this entire manufacturing system came into existence simultaneously. That means holy creation. If two things have to be simultaneously exist, where they say that one evolved from the other, but one cannot evolve from the other, both have to be simultaneously exist. So then a creator has to be behind it. And DNA obviously presents one of the most pressing problems of evolutionists. It is an intensely complex substance, yet it must be present in the very earliest form of living matter. How can evolution explain this? They just cannot. The first move of life can be possible only with the help of a DNA. So DNA and life both have to be simultaneously. Then only it can. No one has ever shown how it could arise from non-living chemicals. How then such complex aspect of life like DNA This inability to demonstrate spontaneous generation of life from non-living things is another key weakness of evolutionary theory. It is said by Walter Brown, a scientist, said that's impossible, he said. It's impossible.
The secular scientist?
Hmm?
Secular scientist?
It's a secular scientist. Well, they all became believers later, you know. Yeah. You know, if God was not there, Adam and Eve were to be evolved from, suppose, the highest form of, you know, what do you call the monkey, the highest form of chimpanzee or whatever you want to call. The DNA in that one has contained only information about the monkey. The monkey DNA cannot be changed. Because the monkey DNA changed and the monkey ceased to be a monkey. Monkey cannot contain a human DNA. Because the human DNA contains all the information to produce a human. So every time monkey relates with a monkey, the product will be a monkey. Because the DNA is there. So for a man to become, the very moment the man becomes a reality, every cell in it contains the human DNA. So somebody must be there to make man. To make man, what do you need? The human DNA must be there. The human DNA cannot come from anything else. It can come only from a man, or it can come from a creator who can create it. Because the creator is almighty. He has all the knowledge. So simultaneous production of the DNA and the particular animal or life that contains the DNA is just an impossibility. It's just not possible. So the scientists, they talk about spontaneous generation. Atheistic evolutionists believe that evolution is rational. They must establish the possibility of spontaneous generation. How can spontaneous generation be rational? That's the question. Because rational means there should be somebody to thinking, right? Thinking and reason are related. Can DNA think? That's the question. DNA has all, man's DNA has all the capacity, all the information about thinking. But you take a DNA out of man, can the DNA think? The DNA of man can be think only when it is present in the living man. So how can this spontaneous generation come? All of a sudden there was something and then boom, it came out. This is absolutely nonsense, In order for life to have arisen due to random process, at some point in time, non-living matter must have become alive. That's the whole problem. Non-living matter spontaneously must become living matter. The non-living matter does not have the DNA of the living matter. So how can it be from the non-living, living, with all the informations? So the spontaneous, generation is a nonsense. Alexander Oparin, he has a theory, he is the one who brought the theory of spontaneous generation, that a prebiotic soup gave rise to life. That's his theory, a prebiotic soup. In other sense, there was a biotic soup which contained all that is required to make a DNA. But the thing is, suppose there is a prebiotic soup, don't ask the question who made that. That's because that's, you are creating problem. But suppose there is a prebiotic soup which contains all the chemicals that are necessary to make DNA. But a DNA doesn't have the chemicals only, DNA has information. Now who will arrange these chemicals in that order and then write all the information? It is like you have all the pulp and everything that is required to make paper. Spontaneously paper has to be made and then all the information that is in the book has to be recorded in it. So spontaneous generation is amazing, isn't it? I wish it just happen every day so that we don't have a press or anything. Just all the books will be published by spontaneous generation. Because after all, it has only 26 letters. Much more easy, right? It just doesn't work that way. So Alexander Oparin's theory of spontaneous generation, that a prebiotic soup gave rise to life, is now rejected by most evolutionists. There are actually basically nobody who subscribe to it because they have this problem. Where the soup has come from, even assuming there was a soup and the soup contained all the essential elements necessary to create an DNA, still the problem is who will write all the information necessary to make an amoeba. Because the amoeba was not there, only the soup was there. So this problem is there. As science progresses, the theory of spontaneous generation becomes less credible. So today, spontaneous generation is not that much taught. Dean Kenyon, a biologist and a former chemical evolutionist, he is a believer, later became a believer, he writes, when all relevant lines of evidences are taken into account and all the problems squarely faced, I think we must conclude that life owes its inception to a source outside of nature. That's what this is. He tried to study, said that, well, outside nature there must be somebody who is responsible for all these things. That's the only logically consistent, coherent, theory you can make. To say that all these things happen by chance or by, spontaneous reactions and all this Big Bang theory and all these things, it's just he said that, no, there must be somebody. You can call him God, anything you want, but there must be somebody outside the nature. There must be an intelligent person or a thing, whatever, there is supernatural intelligence. Some of these scientists won't say it is necessarily God, but they have come to the point to say that, well, we admit there is supernatural intelligence because the order and the complexity naturally suggest there must be intelligence. Because non-intelligence cannot produce a system. A system cannot be produced. Only confusion can be produced. So Dean Kenyon based his conclusion on 4 premises. First of all, he said the impossibility of spontaneous generation or origin of genetic information. He said that's one thing. Spontaneous origin of genetic information is impossible. Information you take about the smallest single-celled thing. Even that single-celled thing has tens of thousands of information in it. And how systematically all that. Because from it what comes out? Another amoeba, another single-celled being, exactly like it, with all the information copied into it. This process keeps on for thousands and thousands of years. You copy from this DNA, every product comes. It is just like the books printed from the same, the same page you printed from what you call you have made your type and all that, and then from that one, everything comes exactly, like that. So all of a sudden you looked at it, hey, we were printing Ramayana and all of a sudden Bible came in from the same thing. Isn't that wonderful? It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. Children are born from parents. It doesn't matter even you have 1 lakh children born from the same parents. Today they can find out whether all these children are born from the same parents or a different parent got involved in between. See, that sort of thing. That means that, the printing press of the parents can, print out only things that are in their DNA, whatever the DNA contains, that's all. A new information type has to come, then a different DNA has to get involved. So, Kenyon said that the impossibility of spontaneous origin of genetic information has led him to come to this conclusion. Secondly, he said the fact that all attempts to duplicate the conditions necessary for chemical evolution yield non-biological material. They have tried to create artificially or DNA. They have never created a biological DNA. Means a DNA that is related to any form of life. All that they can have is, a biotic soup. They can add and all these chemicals that are needed in the same proportion and everything, but still a DNA, biological DNA doesn't come. You can call it a chemical DNA, but not a biological. A DNA that is able to produce life. A DNA in which these informations of life is recorded. They have not been. Science has not produced even one DNA. They can produce non-biological, chemical DNA, but that has no life in it. Chemical DNA, you can take a sodium chloride and you can produce a crystal or something, it has no life in it. But to have life, you have to have biological DNA, but that they have not been able to produce. Thirdly, he said, the unfounded nature of the belief that prebiotic conditions encouraged a trend toward the formation of L-amino acids. That's an assumption. No scientist could ever produce it, ever prove it scientifically there was a prebiotic soup. Say, did you see it? Do you find any trace of a prebiotic soup anywhere you done excavations? You have it, you assume it, because without assumption you cannot start, because then you have to explain, how come you have all these things, are so percentage wise arranged in the soup, It cannot. So that's an assumption. It is an unfounded assumption. The whole assumption is unfounded. Nobody has proved it. So it remains an assumption. For geochemical evidence that oxygen existed in significant amount in the Earth's earliest atmosphere, that creates a problem. Because if you have oxygen, what happened? Oxidation takes place. Once oxidation takes place, life cannot. See, whatever chemicals you have, the oxygen is there, the oxidation takes place. So oxidation takes place. What means the organic compounds decompose when the oxygen is there, that's one. You keep a piece of meat there and there is plenty of oxygen. That's why you have to sterilize it, put it in the vacuum. Otherwise, next morning you come, what happens? Start decaying. So, for the evolution to take place, it has to be in a place where this oxygen is there. But then the problem, if oxygen is not there, then ozone will not be there. If oxygen is not there, ozone will not be there. If ozone is not there, then what will happen? Any life generator will be killed immediately by the poisonous rays that is coming from external. So, you have to have oxygen, you have to have ozone. But to protect all these things from not affecting the life, you have to have intelligent person to control it. So Kenyon said that, I cannot believe that. Without the help of an intelligent agency, this DNA could be formed, life could be begun. The existence of oxygen creates an insurmountable problem for chemical evolution. If the Earth early in the alleged evolution had oxygen in its atmosphere, the chemicals needed for life to begin would have been removed by oxidation. But if there had been no oxygen, then there would have been no ozone in the upper atmosphere. Without this ozone, life would be quickly destroyed by the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Ozone and life, therefore, must have originated simultaneously at the time of creation. That's the only conclusion you can. So, Kenyon was an intellectually honest person. He said that, no, I just cannot hold on to the theory of evolution anymore. So at least I have to say that there is an, outside nature intelligence who has controlled this process. The second law of thermodynamics, another major hurdle for evolutionists is the second law of thermodynamics. We had talked about it earlier. The clash between evolution and the second law of thermodynamics is very serious. A. Wilder-Smith, some of you may have read some of his book. I think he has 5 or 6 PhDs in different subjects from the famous universities in Europe. Wilder-Smith, not an ordinary man. He has also chemistry, physics, archaeology, so many subjects he has PhDs. He is no ordinary brain. And this man is a major creationist from Europe. He pointed out some of the implications of the second law of thermodynamics. I quote him. The second law of thermodynamics states that although the total energy in the cosmos remains constant, the amount of energy available to do useful work is always getting smaller and smaller and smaller. See? Evolution needs greater amount of energy because evolution is from a smaller type to the bigger type. So naturally what we need? The energy, available energy for reactions force will be increasing. But second law of thermodynamics says the available energy, total amount will be, the both sides the equation will be there. But the available energy for useful reactions will be coming less and less. So how can the two go? So evolutionists have a real big problem. Because your science theory says that if an amoeba was formed, then from amoeba a single cell to a double celled, you have to have more energy required than for the production of the single cell, double amount. But your theory says that the amount is going down. But evolution assumes requires more. So where are you going to supply it? It's a self-contradictory theory. It's a self-contradictory. It is just like saying that the more you cut an apple into pieces, the bigger the apple becomes. That's what it is. The more pieces you cut, the bigger. Every piece becomes bigger. I said, if every big piece has to become bigger, then there will be more energy available to each piece. Because if the whole apple is giving you 100 calories, if you cut it into 1,000 pieces, for each piece to give you 1,000 calories, with every cutting the calorie must be increasing. But that's not the experience. With every cutting the calories decreasing, the available calories decreasing. So how are you going to explain it? You cannot explain it. I mean, this common sense. It's common sense. So everybody admits, all biologists and all chemical scientists and physical scientists, they all admit that the principle of entropy, that the available useful energy is going down and down and down. They all saying that the sun's light energy, heat energy is going down, the water energy is going down, the all kinds of energy, magnetic energy of the earth is going down and down and down, everything is, all kinds of energy is going down, and finally then we're going to have an energy crisis. But evolutionists say that no, everything is growing higher and higher, which requires more and more energy. Where it comes from, they have no explanation. I wish they say that word's explanation. So, Wilder Smith said the second law of thermodynamics states that although the total energy in the cosmos remains constant, the amount of energy available to do useful work is always getting smaller. Now, this law has great implications regarding the effect of time on the orderliness of the universe. While the evolutionists call for the universe to grow more orderly as evolution progresses, the second law of thermodynamics assures us that order tends to disintegrate into disorder. As it goes, it disintegrates to disorder. Wilder Smith explains the contrast. He says, the theory of evolution teaches when all the frills are removed, just the opposite of the state of affairs demanded by the second law of thermodynamics happens. That's what we just say, just impossible. Just impossible. Thomas Nelson, another great scientist, I think he is from which is a Massachusetts Institute of Technology or something. I have his book. I cannot find it now. I heard is one of his book. The book. What is the name of the book? Anyway, he is trying to prove that evolution is impossible, because he said that you take the ratio at which the earth is losing its gravitational force. It is shown that the earth's gravitational force is decreasing as the days go by. So if you say that you know the rate at which it is decreasing, and the evolutionists say that the earth is what? 5 billion years old. So if the rate at which it is losing, you multiply, take it back to 5 billion years old, he said that it's impossible. The earth and all the universe will be sucked boom into the sun. Or the gravity of the force, it will so big that the sun will be sucked into it, like a small children will, it's gone. Because it's so big.